Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Paul Branch, and for those that don't know me, I am the Chief Operating Officer here at World Commerce and Contracting. So thank you, first of all, for joining the World Commerce and Contracting and Agiloft webinar, entitled, as you see on the screen here, How Children's National Used CLM to streamline operations and ensure stability and compliance in uncertain times. It's a really interesting title, and I can guarantee we've got some really interesting collateral to back us up, and some really interesting practitioners today. So we've got three panelists. Anthony Phuong from Children's National Hospital. Welcome, Anthony. And a face that we recognize, Hiro Notaney from Agiloft, and of course myself, Paul Branch. So before we start, just a few pieces of housekeeping. As always, with our recordings here, you've entered with your telephone line muted or your VoIP connection muted. That's not because we don't want to hear from you. We most definitely do. So please feel free to ask us questions as we go. And if your interface is anything like mine, you'll see that there's a Q&A, question and answer tab. So please ask us questions as we go. And what we'll do is we'll address the questions as they come up, if we can, or if not, there's a sizable chunk of Q&A time that we've left at the end, where we'll attempt to answer those questions that we did not have a chance to get through. Okay, so without further ado then, one further question we always get asked. Yes, there will be a copy of the presentation that's provided to you and a link to this recording so that in fact you can listen to the replay. So yes, both of those will be going out within 24 hours of the conclusion of this session. So now, without further ado, Hiro, a lot of things are happening at Agiloft this year. So let's see, you've got a new CEO, a new CRO, and you've raised a few pennies as well. Can you fill us in on what's happening?
Thanks, Paul. Yes, it's been quite a ride this year. So in September, we announced a $45 million growth equity investment from FTV Capital and named Eric Laughlin our new CEO. Eric was previously head of EY's legal practice. So welcome to Eric. We also hired a new Chief Revenue Officer, Kevin Niblock, who joins us from Zora. And from an industry perspective this year, Gartner recognized us as a leader in its first Magic Quadrant for CLM. And then a few weeks later, Gartner's Critical Capabilities report came out, and we were the top-rated CLM vendor in all 4 use cases: procurement, sales, legal, and enterprise. Spend Matters just also rated us the value leader for CLM in its 2024 report. And the icing on the cake, our engineering team won a Stevie for its AI engine. So, of course, none of this would happen without customers like Children's National and Anthony.
So what a great segue. Thank you, Hiro. So Anthony, let's bring in your experiences at Children's National Hospital. Now, Anthony here is a senior paralegal at Children's National and has spearheaded a recent transformation in the organization's contract management activities. So, Anthony, perhaps if you could help us set the scene by telling us a bit about Children's National and what were the drivers that led you to consider buying a CLM software suite.
Sure thing. Thank you, Paul. Children's National Hospital is located in Washington, D.C. We're celebrating our 150th birthday come December of this year. We are a 323-bed acute hospital with over 6,000 employees. We're a level 1 pediatric trauma center for serving the tri-state area. We have 8 patient centers that provide care to D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. We also have a Children's National Research Institute, which is a leader in basic and clinical research programs, with research of more than 70% of children's research funding coming from federal agencies. As part of the research, as well as we have education Each year, pediatric training is provided to 232 students at George Washington University, which is our affiliate. We're the pediatric academic arm of the university, as well as other 400 students from other institutions. With all this going on, you can imagine a large number of contracts that are needed and submitted to the organization for review. Thus, why we had to consider a contract lifecycle management platform.
Understood. Yeah, lots going on, busy, many moving parts, I understand. So can you share with our audience today, what were the specific drivers that caused you to look for contract management software?
Sure. Our organization, we wanted a platform that from beginning to end, so it was a central repository from the beginning to the end in storage of an executed contract. To replace our current process back then, it was manually intensive with big Excel spreadsheets and email inboxes as well. As not only that, but it's also added to compliance with our policies and procedures for our organization, our business partners to follow, as well as transparencies on turnaround approvals from each department, so that our business partners knew the status of their contracts.
Gotcha. So one of the questions that's come in already is around your activity here. Did you progress a detailed RFP, RFI exercise, or how did you progress that internally to get your stakeholders engaged?
Well, it was just getting them on board, getting buy-ins, and just getting them to know that they had to adhere to our policies and procedures for contract review, and just getting them on board and submitting their contracts, because during that time, before it was centralized to legal, people were signing contracts on their own and without review.
And did you progress then a traditional procurement exercise, or was it more of a bespoke engagement? How did that work?
It was an engagement with procurement as well as our research centers as well, because those are the big drivers of the contracts. Supply chain was the driver for our purchase goods and services, and legal was reviewing them, as well as big multi-million-dollar grants and awards coming in from the research centers.
Cool, excellent. Okay, so Alistair, yeah, we will go to the poll next, I think. Anthony's going to share the results in just a second, but we thought it would be really cool to see our expectations. So you're going to hear the answer in a second, so it's not a big secret, but what improvements do you think were made to children's national contract turnaround times? Were they improved by, so Alistair, if you'd like to pop up the poll, were they improved by 5%? Were they improved by 10%? Were they improved by 15%, 25%, or a whopping 50%? So this is the contract turnaround times that were judged before the implementation of a CLM tool and then subsequent to that implementation. So we'll just keep that poll open just for a few more seconds. So I believe you can only click on one of the options, so please do that, and then we'll take a look at the results. So as again, you are going to hear the results in just a second, but Alistair, if you could close the poll now and let's take a look at the results. Okay, so interesting spread, and I must admit to being quite surprised, because a lot of the expectations, 75% of you guys out there think that the benefits are going to be at least 25% and a large chunk 50%. So did I do the maths right on that one? Let me just take a quick look.
Yeah, so you would expect that, Paul, because all the people on here are interested in contract lifecycle management software, so they're thinking they're going to make some big improvements.
Right, very, very interesting indeed. Now, what we're going to hear, we have a live practitioner, so don't let Anthony go without asking him some killer questions. This is your opportunity. Use the Q&A tab. We've had some questions in already. Keep those questions coming. So Anthony, these results that we just looked at, Really interesting. Tell us actually what happened.
Okay, as from the bar chart, as you can see that we dramatically dropped 52% of our turnaround time once we implemented bearer contracts. We implemented bearer contracts on July 1st of 2018, which is reflected on the chart as fiscal year 2019. You can see that 52% drop of turnaround time, just because we were more transparent about our review to our business partners.
That's quite stunning, isn't it? I mean, that's a great stat, and I'm still surprised that folks gravitated to the higher end of that scale. That's really interesting, and indeed very impressive. So congratulations. But can you give us a little bit more color around those numbers? How many contracts are we talking about? What sort of contracts are they? You know, are they your own paper or somebody else's? Give us a little bit of color around how you delivered such a dramatic improvement.
Sure. So in 2016, Children's National Legal Department centralized all contract reviews to the legal department. As you can see, we were only receiving about like roughly less than 700 in fiscal year 2016. But as we instituted more centralization to the legal department, you can see the total number of contracts submitted has significantly increased. And as I said, for fiscal year 2019, bearer contracts was implemented, and with the growing trend of all contracts being submitted to legal, we needed an automated system. That's why we had to look for a contract lifecycle management platform.
Right. I mean, your situation is very typical of folks in a medium enterprise where there's many moving parts and quite a significant contract engagement. So here you've talked about time savings, particularly around the contract review cycle. Can you share what other benefits that you saw?
Sure. Having bearer contracts in place, our business partner had to submit all their contracts to adhere to the policies and procedures that were related to the contract management process. Transparency and workflows. Our business users can instantly check on the status of any contract at any time, as well as integration with DocuSign considerably reduces the efforts to execute a contract instead of handwritten signatures. It also ensured that corporate compliances and policies around contract were being followed as well. So overall, a robust CLM platform was needed to allow our organization to grow with the large amounts of contracts we were receiving.
Yeah, we're based on our research, we're seeing quite an increased focus in integration.
Yes.
From my experience, having gone through the implementation cycle for a couple of CLM tools now, the cost of integration into back office systems was then, and I'm talking 3 or 4 years ago, inordinately expensive. And as part of it, hugely time consuming. Was that your experience, or did you see that the application of open APIs made this Salesforce integration DocuSign integration much more straightforward?
It was definitely more straightforward because, traditionally we always had hard paper copies of executed contracts that were filed in some department or in the legal department itself. But just the integration of DocuSign just allowed us to do more electronic execution of contracts and less waste of paper, less cost of buying paper. And then it was easy accessible to both the vendor and ourselves, that it was essentially stored in what we call bearer contracts, which is the Agiloft platform.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul, that's a really important point. The integrations one, and I think Anthony will talk about PeopleSoft integration later, but that's what we're seeing as well, is that especially in the enterprise space, people really want their CLM systems to integrate with both their procurement systems, so whatever procurement system they're using, as well as their sales systems, whether that's Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or what have you. So they really, it's really a point of emphasis. So
our research has shown that it's not just within the enterprise, into the back office and front office systems within the enterprise. The demands now, particularly post in the latter stages of the pandemic are around the supply ecosystem and the importance of being able to reach through to see the performance of secondary and tertiary suppliers in your supply ecosystem. We may very well come back to that, but there's some great questions out there. So some detailed questions, Anthony. So how often are contracts edited after completion, asks Alexandre.
I'm sorry, Paul, I couldn't hear. I'm sorry. Once again, Paul, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So how often are contracts edited or changed once they've been executed?
It all depends on the type of business that the business partner wants, the goals that our organization wants to. We want to ensure we lessen the risk tolerance for Children's National. We get outside vendors contracts that we'll review and mark up, or as well as if their vendor is willing to accept our templated agreements, then it could be as simple as 1 or 2 day turnaround time. But it all depends. We usually do a 3-day business turnaround time for our business partners, but it all depends on what the goal of that contract is for our business partners. We want to ensure to mitigate the risk to Children's National. Understood.
Question from Jack. In fact, a pile of questions from Jack. Let's see if we can get through them. Did you have to create a clause library for new contracts, or was that something that that Agiloft brought alongside with you?
So we do have the functionality of the clause library, but we had already developed template agreements that we can upload into Bear contracts and have our business partner request that template agreement, such as a consulting agreement or a business associate agreement. But we do have the functionality of a clause library that we're not utilizing right now because we already have template agreements.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in there and say that clause library is a standard part of the CLM system. So
and many, and it's a key feature to look for in a viable CLM platform. 2 further questions, clarification ones from Jack. First off, was the contract stored within the Agiloft system or within a corporate procurement system or somewhere else? That's the first question.
Our executed contracts are stored within Bear contracts. So right. It's one central repository that anyone in the organization who has the permissions to view that certain contract can go in and pull it out and review it, or even look at it to do further negotiations.
And it's my experience, if you put store the contract in the tool that is used to create the contract, in this case the Agiloft platform, that's a much more seamless experience from a user's perspective, rather than try and storing it in different locales. Okay, one more question, and then we'll need to move on. But around obligations tracking, did you use the Agiloft capability for obligations management?
We did, actually. So they were able to develop what we call the status bar, which you'll see later on in the slides, and it just gives a business partner a transparency of where the approval process or review process that their contract submission is currently in. So we did use that out of the Agiloft obligation function that was available.
Okay, keep the questions coming. We're going to move off those just for a second, but I'm sure we'll come back. So let's go back though to the compliance issue that you raised a little earlier, because clearly compliance to policies and procedures is an important hurdle for any organization, but especially large enterprises like yours, and particularly those that are in heavily regulated industries. So can you tell us a little bit more about the policies and procedures that your business partners are now able to follow as a consequence of your Agiloft deployment?
Sure. So, part of the buy-in from our leadership with Agiloft is that we wanted to ensure that our business partners, when submitting a contract, were adhering to some of our policies and procedures, such as vendor management. Was the vendor sole source justified, or was a RFP requested from the vendor to ensure that we're getting good pricing? We also have a contract review management policy and procedure as well. Submission of all contracts have to be submitted to legal for review before they are executed. storage of executed contract, we needed somewhere to central repository, which Agiloft provided us as well. And the final big one for us was signature approval authority. Who can sign a contract on behalf, what dollar amount, and for how long, the duration of that contract. All that was built into Agiloft to ensure that our business partners were following our organizational policies and procedures.
Cool, thank you. Really good. So let's look at the operational benefits for just a second. So are there operational benefits associated with these time savings? I mean, I'm assuming there must be, but what does that mean for the extra time that it provides your organization?
Yep. So you could see the result of the decrease in turnaround time. So that allowed the legal department to not just review contracts just for the, for review, just to review them, but it allowed us to spend more time with our business partners to negotiate a better deal, to get a better pricing for that contract. And in the long term, it would be cost savings to our organization, even if we saved $1 here or there, but just the number of widgets over that number of years could total up to major cost savings for our organization, and especially during this time when a lot of organizations are, tightening their waistline around financial and spending itself. So that was the free time that allowed our legal reviewers to spend with our business partner was valuable to them.
Excellent. Okay, so let's change gears now, because it sounds like you're getting some really good benefits out of your CLM implementation. So let's talk about that. How did you go about implementation, and what was your experience? Share with us some of the good and perhaps some of the bad.
Sure. So, with when we were challenged by our leadership of getting an implementation of a CLM, we did a couple of RFPs and, found Agiloft to be the best for us, because we implemented, even though we consulted with consultants that were experts in CLM implementation of that, so they were familiar with bearer contracts. We launched bearer contracts on July 1st of 2018 with only 2 contract workflows, with a phased-in approach for other contract workflows as well. Benefits is now our business partners can go on the bearer contracts and see the status of the approval and see how long the turnaround time is. That increase of submissions of contracts by the whole organization, adherence to our contract management policies, increased the numbers that we got for submissions, as well as the execution of our contracts were done more in a timely manner with the interface of DocuSign, so that you don't have to email back and forth anymore. And overall, just it was a robust CLM platform for us that will ensure that it will grow with us as we grow as an organization.
And next slide, please. Sorry, I think we're a slide behind there.
Yeah, please. And a question for you then, Anthony. Overall, how long did it take? It's on the last bullet point here.
Yeah, it took about 6 months. So from just developing and the various workflows, and we launched. It took 6 months, and we launched it July 1st of 2018. And just to go back of the implementation, we did do the approach of train the super user to end user, and what we call train the trainer. So that allowed us to have people who frequently submit contracts, known as super users, to help and assist people who only submit 1 or 2 contracts at one time, so that it helped us train the whole organization to kind of spread our training. And we just got our internal stakeholders all involved, just because that our leadership wanted to ensure that we were following our policies and procedures and being compliant with them.
There's some key points, some key learning in here, and this is an important implementation step that I would like really to share with our listeners today. In that you adopted it wasn't a big bang. It was a measured functionality rollout based with a limited set of users to start and a limited scope, and then you rolled that out successfully in a series of chunks. That model works, I think. Would you agree?
Yes, it does. Yep. I would say it works because we don't want to inundate our organization with all of our workflows and contract types at once, and it would overwhelm them. So it allowed us to release two workflows and then tweak and update any approval workflows that we needed to. So it was a learning process for us as well as implementers of the Bear contract system.
So Sandeep asks a question. So who has access to the software, and what controls did you put in place to ensure the integrity of the contracts database? That's a really great question.
Great question. And what we did was, so in our organization, every employee has the capability to submit a contract, but they're only granted permission of a contract creator. So they only could submit contracts and fill out information related to the contract. Permissions to contracts was also tightened by what department you were in and what level of approver. So if you are a contract creator, you only see contracts that you submitted, as well as any contracts within your department. But to tighten more security around that is, depending on your level of permission, is what the accessibility you have and viewability you have of a contract. A legal department, of course, we have access to every contract. But if you were in, for example, our cardiology department, you would only see contracts that were related to cardiology in your department. So we did tighten the security a lot to ensure that not everyone had access, that didn't need access to those particular contracts.
Right. Another key.
Sorry, just to add on that, Paul. The system allows you to sort of configure permissions right down to the individual department or even field level. So you can tighten security however much you want.
Right, a really important feature of any CLM capability, totally. Now, Anthony, we touched on this a bit earlier, but talk to us about stakeholders. One question that our practitioners always raise, and today is no exception, is who were your stakeholders, and how did you go about ensuring that they were included and making the case to them for why you needed to deploy a contract management capability?
Yep. So we got leadership from three main stakeholders: legal, the legal office, because we're the reviewers of those agreements. Supply chain was a big stakeholder as well, because for our organization, they are the ones who purchase the goods and materials and services, so we needed them. And as I mentioned earlier before, our research, grants, and finance office was needed, as well as becoming a international research center. We get lots of grants and awards from a federal agency as well as private institutions, so we had to bring them in as well, because they're a pretty big stakeholder for our organization.
Gotcha. So we heard earlier that your implementation approach was basically to bring in workflows in a systematic way. So how did you agree with stakeholders which ones to do first? Why did you go with a phased approach instead of doing all at once?
Yeah. So we, the legal, supply chain, and our research office looked at the various contracts that were submitted to legal, and we started with the two widely submitted ones, which are consulting agreements and purchase services agreements. And we wanted to use a phased approach just to ensure, like I said before, not to inundate our whole organization with workflows and just with a new platform or a new software submission platform. So doing the phase approach, well, like I said, it allowed us to tweak and correct the approval workflows as we needed them to ensure that it was a seamless submission portal at the very end when we did the final release of all the contract type workflows.
Gotcha. Good. So speaking of stakeholders again, did the stakeholders for your project already know the potential benefits of CLM capability? Or did you have to sell it to them? Did you have to make that case for a CLM system? And if so, how did you go about doing that?
Yep. So our stakeholders were aware of the potential benefits of a CLM, though further information, was needed of their buy-in. Benefits such as compliance of policies and procedures, automation of signing the contracts within Agiloft itself, and the transparency of the workflows was a buy-in for them as well, just so that we were transparent and people just had an idea of where their contract was in. Legal is sometimes known as the black hole of contracts. It gets lost in there, but we wanted to ensure that we were not the black hole, that we want to be very transparent of the status and the review time. And that was one of the big buy-ins that our leadership wanted, as well as our stakeholders.
Sure. Now, one of the areas that's getting a lot of scrutiny these days is, as we talked about earlier, actually, is the supply chain. Not just the chain itself, but also the entire ecosystem. So what did your supply chain office get out of the CLM implementation?
Yes, our supply chain office was able to manage vendors more efficiently, as well as label them as approved vendors if they gave us a good pricing than other vendors. So they were able to develop an approved vendor list for the organization, as well ensure that any payments from our accounts payable office was tied to a PO had an approved and signed contract attached to that as well. So it was the payment was verified, and ensure our business partners were adhering to the vendor management policies and procedures in place. Like I mentioned before, making sure that the vendor, if you sole sourced it or if you went out and got an RFP for the services that our organization needed.
So a couple of clarification points, if I may. Colleen asks, do you include physician contracts in your contract portfolios?
We do not, unfortunately, because they are considered employment agreements, and we don't put any employment agreements in bearer contracts, even though there's security that we can do it. It's just a practice that's kept in our human resource or medical staffing office. We just don't want that insured to be in bearer contracts, though we probably could with the security that that's built around it, that we could, but we do not include that. Right.
And a question from Ian. Did you launch bearer contracts for your buy and sell side contracts? And if so, who owns it for the sales team side? Procurement's clear, I think, but who owns it from the sales side?
So various our organization has various divisions and offices like cardiology, hematology, and oncology. If they provide a sales side, which what we call providing services, it's stored in bearer contracts as well. It's launched in bearer contracts, it's approved in bearer contracts, and stored in bearer contracts. So even if we're a purchaser of services or a seller of our professional services, we store them all within bearer contracts.
Okay, one more question, then we must move on. But from Sam's asking, so do you do all of the authoring and all of the redlining in the system, or does that come outside, unfortunately? I'm
sorry, I just missed that question. Can you repeat that again, Paul?
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's the joys of working in an office environment. So the question is from Sam. Do you do all of the authoring and all of the redlining within the system, or do you have to use a combination of Word and other tools to help you along?
So bearer contracts and the Agiloft platform has itself a Word interface built in, which you could use it on the interface itself, or you could download to the desktop version, and you could redline and add comments and edits, and then we save that and upload that up into bearer contract as well under the attachments section of the of bearer contract. So it's within the interface itself that creates version control, or you could download it to the desktop version and work from there.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, well, just on the point real quick, the Word in our upcoming release, we have an enhancement to the Word add-in. So it's going to be even easier to work in Word and have the changes, red lines, etc., saved into the system directly.
So certainly, it's the hallmark of a quality CLM product that works with the Word as a plugin, where all of the data can be held centrally within the system, like the clause library. Yet its rendering, its representation, and ultimate delivery is through the tools that folks still use to orchestrate the negotiation. So that's a good side. It looks like Anthony may have some folks in his office. So can you talk maybe a little bit more, Anthony, about your users? And you mentioned earlier this role of the super user, and how does that differ from the end user, the ultimate recipient?
Sure. With the rollout of any new application, we wanted to ensure that our users are knowledgeable and accepting the platform itself. So super users would be our business partners that submit contracts on a regular basis. And such persons would be like a program lead or a department director. For example, we have a contact person in our foundation who submit contracts for everybody within that department itself. And they would be assisting the business administrators of answering questions and helping other end users in that department to submit contracts.
Fascinating. Okay, you've whetted our appetite. So can you share with us some what the tool looks like in real life?
Sure. So you can see this is our Bearer Contracts legal intake form. It's various fields that our business partner fill in, so that we're customizable from Agiloft of the information we wanted. And the great thing I mentioned before is that status bar right above. You could see that there are various circles. It lets the end user know where their contract is. On this one, it's just a draft because they're creating the submission right now.
Yeah, so things to look at. I mean, we're not selling the Agiloft platform, but things to look at with high-end CLM tools: the use of good graphics, clean interface. You know, these sorts of key components are things that are visually attractive, so that it's easy to use and easy to find the information that you're looking for. So, looks good. So, what else you got?
Let me show you a screen of our dashboard. So this is the Bearer Contract legal dashboard that's viewable only to the legal team. As you can see, it's a quick snapshot of the various information you need. Like for this one, how many contracts were submitted within a certain time of period, the turnaround time for our reviewers, that it took them to review a contract. So this dashboard is very customizable. Agiloft could customize it any way you like it. Visually pleasing to your eye as well as, and it's just a great thing for our business partners to be able to just take a quick snapshot of any information they want on their dashboard at that time.
So Hiro, that's hugely visually attractive. I get. How much energy goes into making this specific and work for Children's National, or is this something that's available out of the box?
Yeah, it's available. If you actually go to the next slide, it's all in tiles. So the dashboards are completely customizable to the company and the user. So these metrics tiles are configured to show only what a particular user is interested in. So Anthony showed the legal dashboard, and that will be very different to what somebody in procurement sees or somebody in sales operations or even the CFO sees. So they're very easy to configure. It's drag and drop, and it's all based on these tiles, and you can make it look however you want.
Powerful, powerful. So giving stakeholders visibility into the information that matters to them, that's common sense really, but I would guess that makes a huge difference when you get to adoption. So in your experience, who are the primary stakeholders that you're seeing?
Yeah, so different stakeholders get different value from CLM. There are 4 or 5 main stakeholders. The general counsel or legal department, they care about visibility into risk exposure and the tools to reduce risk and ensure regulatory compliance. So a great example in today's world is ensuring all company contracts have a force majeure clause. The legal department also cares about not being a roadblock to the business, so reviewing and approving contracts in a timely manner. We saw from Anthony that automating CLM decreases the review time dramatically. Automation also reduces the number of hours attorneys spend reviewing standard contracts. That translates into a pretty significant cost savings and also great mental health savings for the attorneys involved. From a procurement perspective, the chief purchasing officer is focused on vendor management, everything from onboarding vendors to making sure policies are being followed. The real prize for purchasing is the ability to negotiate better deals, and even more importantly, to track obligations to make sure you're getting what you paid for. So I think there was a question earlier about obligations management. That's really a key aspect of contract management software. So the fourth constituency, if you like, or stakeholder on the sales operations side, sales leaders care about reducing red tape, getting from an agreement to signature as soon as possible while reducing the administrative burden on the sales team. Salespeople basically want to close deals as quickly as possible with as few obstacles as possible. So a contract automated system reduces that red tape for them. Another key stakeholder is the CFO. They care about the visibility into the cost structure and visibility into short and long-term commitments. So a CLM system gives CFOs immediate visibility into the actions he or she can take to address events in the marketplace. So if you need to cancel a bunch of events on the, for example, do your contracts allow you to do that? CFOs also like that CLMs close revenue leaks by staying on top of contract end dates. And one final stakeholder I would add is the CIO, and they would care about, you mentioned it earlier, Paul, integrating with existing systems. They care about security, make sure the application needs to be secure, and comply with their current IT policies and procedures.
So this list fits greatly into a question that Mary asked, and it's back to you, Anthony, specifically with relation to Children's National. So what value is added for the Research Institute by having contracts that are managed within this system? Asked another way, do you see each one of these as playing a role, or did one have more significance than any of the others? And Anthony, I think you're on mute. Happens to me all the time.
I do apologize for that, Paul. But no, a contract manager for our research centers is very valuable because it allows them to ensure that they are, getting the revenue, the payments they need to do the studies, but as well as ensure that we're following a strict timeline of the processing time, the deliverables to the federal agency or the private organization. So for them, it's a value added to ensure that the contract's stored within a repository, that the deliverables are on time, because within our Bearer contracts, we can put in milestones for our contract and get alerts for that as well. So it's very beneficial to the research, especially with millions and millions of dollars of funding.
Gotcha. So we talked a little bit earlier about the process that you went through in terms of procurement, RFP, RFI. But let's look at the approach that you adopted for making this vendor selection. Can you take us through that?
Yep. So Agiloft is ready to use right out of the box, but also they customize it to our wants and needs and what we need it for. As I mentioned before, interfacing with our current IT systems such as PeopleSoft and DocuSign was very, very important to us. And as well as, you don't need it, no programming experience or coding was needed. And I have none of those experience, and I'm able to go through Agiloft and use it as smoothly as possible. As well as when we were talking to their implementers, they were knowledgeable of the contract workflows and the approvals that we needed, and they were able to customize everything for us and launch it, like I said, within 6 months of starting to work with them.
So Anthony, I know one of the issues that was important to you was integrating with PeopleSoft. Can you maybe give us a little insight into why that was so critical?
Yep. Our integrations are important to us to ensure that we didn't have to duplicate the same information that already existed in our databases, such as PeopleSoft. That was important because Children's National utilizes PeopleSoft applications for our vendor management, accounts payable, and our human resources databases as well. So this allowed us to nightly sync with Agiloft to update the information within their contracts, such as our employees, those that are terminated, separated, and those are added, just were nightly synced into their contracts to allow us for the creation of their employee profile instead of manually inputting them in.
Great, thanks, Anthony. So speaking of critically important, Paul, I understand WorldCC has recently published some vital research about contracting during the COVID crisis. Can you share some of those insights?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. So I think we've touched on some of these already, actually. Based on our research, a study of over 500 medium to large corporates, stunning result, really. 64% have not made any material investment in automation. So that's point one. So a lot of the folks listening into this, albeit they are front end loaded because they obviously they've got an interest in CLM capability. That's why our audience is here. But I wouldn't mind betting that the corporations that they represent, many of them have made limited investment in automation. But of those that were surveyed, more than 80% said that they would plan to in the next 12 months. So what can we take away from that? There's growing awareness of the benefits that CLM technology can bring to the table, not just at our practitioner level, but also at the C-suite and at the GC level, where there's growing recognition of some of the benefits that can be seen from the adoption, and not just of the technology, but of that three-legged stool of technology, people, and process. The technology that supports the process, that supports the people within the process who have the right skills and capabilities to be successful at what they do. We've also touched on this already. Our research has shown that it's hugely important to get visibility to pass data amongst disparate systems within the IT systems stack, within the CLM tool as much as any other. But as a consequence of the development of open APIs, application programming interfaces, the costs of exchanging data between these disparate platforms has dropped significantly. The movement into the cloud has really accelerated that. But now the cost of operation have moved very much from a CapEx to an OpEx model. The barriers to entry are much lower than they were even a year ago. So what do we take from this? The costs of entry have dropped, not zero, but have dropped significantly. The train is leaving the station. Clearly, folks are looking towards CLM adoption as being a key element. So with those two things coming together, now is probably a really good time to start looking at implementation. So the experiences that you've heard today from Anthony, and in how, Anthony, you approach the implementation, I think is a good model for how this would and should work. But let's look at the here and now. Obviously, we're still very much in a pandemic. So as a healthcare provider, you're obviously on the front line of this COVID crisis. So one, how have you coped, and has the CLM tool helped you in that regard at all?
Sure, Paul. So it was just so funny that we thought our contracts reviews would actually go down during this time, but it actually has gone up in the very beginning. Children's National Hospital was the first pediatric hospital to open a drive-in COVID testing for kids. So we were able to get that up and running within 3 business days, just knowing that our business partners were able to upload their contracts in their contracts, and the reviewers were able to go in quickly to review them and just get them in a timely manner. Like I said, 3 days, 3 businesses to get it running, as well as you mentioned, I think Hiro mentioned before, force majeure clause. We had so many business partners able to access their contracts within their contracts, and just for financial savings to get out of those contracts that were not needed anymore, citing this force majeure clause. So this CLM bear contract was very valuable during this time, just so that we were able to review and approve and sign agreements within a very quick manner, which is, during this time was very important to us to ensure that we were treating our patients quickly during this pandemic.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. It's important, I think, to share that with our members about how somebody on the front line is seeing real benefit. So thank you for sharing that. Before we go into questions, though, please do keep those questions coming. We've got a stack to work our way through. But I would like to pause just very quickly and go to one more poll question for you. So, which CLM automation enables the most value in your organization? So either answer this based on your own experience, what you found as a consequence of your deployment, or based on what you think from what you've heard either today or from what you've read or studied elsewhere. So your options are, it's going to help me improve contract approval workflow, compliance, security, and auditability, other workflows, all the above, or indeed, if you don't have a system, we don't have a system. Number E there. So Alistair, if you could open up the poll, thank you. And team, if you could let's select one of those options, and then we'll take a quick look at the results before we go into our closing Q&As. Just give the folks a couple more seconds. Okay, let's take a look at the results then, if we could. All the above. Now I'm much more confident. That was what I was anticipating. Interesting, 41% said all the above. Equal spread between approval workflows and compliance, security, and auditability. Don't lose sight of that 23%. 23% we don't have a CLM system. Now, to Hiro's point, attendance of this, you're either looking very closely or you're wishing to learn maybe about your first or second generation deployments. So my expectation is that 23% is actually closer to that 60% mark across our entire engagement.
Yeah, to your point earlier, Paul, when you talked about how many people are looking at CLM systems, it's interesting because we're going through this pandemic, and you would expect business to be down, but actually for Agiloft, the third quarter was we had the highest sales in the company's history in the third quarter. So obviously digital transformation is happening, and I think this crisis is accelerating that trend.
That's certainly consistent with what we saw midway through the pandemic. Totally agree. I think the questions around confidence in how deployment of technology is going to impact and improve the process was pretty robust a couple of months ago. I'm starting to hear and see results from most recent surveys that I think is reflective of where we are as a population in terms of concerns about what's going to happen next. So I think folks are starting to move back a little bit from that euphoria that the CLM technology is going to be a game changer. Notwithstanding, and clearly demonstrated by your sales results, this train, as I said before, this train is leaving the station, and now is the time to engage in a assessment of what your business needs are as a corporation, and to see what's out there. Within World Commerce and Contracting, we have a capability. It's software. Let me think if I can get the URL right. Software.worldcc.com. I had to rethink because obviously the name changed the URL. If you go out to that site, you'll see a comparison tool that enables you to look at vendors across the gamut based on capability and functionality. It's an independent view. Obviously, Agiloft are in there as a member in that tool, and you can see the capabilities of the product there. So let's go to our questions now. Thank you for that, Alistair. So let's go to our Q&A. So question first for you, Anthony. We heard very eloquently what you would do and how you approached it and what you would do, and indeed what you did do. But can you share with us, from your experience, some of the things that perhaps you wouldn't repeat, that you wouldn't do again?
I'm not sure, Paul, because it was actually a good experience for myself as well as the legal department, as well as our stakeholders and business partners. I think more maybe a pain point for our business partner would be asking a lot of detailed questions and getting them to provide a good response so that we can ensure to capture that in the workflow process to make sure that prior approvals were needed if they were needed from another department or so. But I think it was probably more the painstaking for our business partners of the detailed questions that we had to ask them while we were implementing and developing the workflows, I think. But otherwise, I think our organization actually had a good experience with implementation of their contracts.
Great, thank you. And so Hiro, same question for you. Based on your experience, what are the pitfalls that most folks drop down that you can help them navigate through?
Yeah, so one of the things I would say is maybe have a good idea of what you're trying to accomplish, what the end state looks like. If you can define what success looks like, it's helpful then to get there. You can then build a roadmap to get there. I won't go into a big sales pitch about Agiloft and its customizability and configurability and all of that stuff, but one of the things that smooths implementation is you're going to change your mind. Business processes are going to change, users are going to come up with something, and the more flexible you can be, the better it is. I said I wouldn't go into a sales pitch, but I'll just give you one stat. Our implementations, we have a 98.6% success rate of coming in on budget and on time. So if you compare that to Gartner's report, where they talk about 30% of enterprise implementations are not successful, I think there's a lot to be said about the implementation process itself. As important as the software is implementation, people who know what they're doing, people who have experience with CLM that can guide you. So I'd throw that in there. Those are important aspects.
Great, thank you. Interesting observation. So I think we have time for maybe one more question and a minute maximum. So this one's for you, Anthony. So what was the percentage of the use cases that were covered by the system, I guess, out of the box? And how many, if any, were missing from your expectation list when you deployed the Agiloft solution?
So I think right out of the box, if we used Agiloft right out of the box, it would probably encompass probably 60% of our contracts, because we already had contract templates in place already. So just uploading those with the workflows. But I would say 40% needed more customization of the workflows itself to ensure that we covered all the compliance of policies and procedures and develop of new contracts or review of vendor contracts. But otherwise, right out of the box is probably 60% because we already had contract templates in place already that we could use Agiloft for already. Great.
Okay, that gives us that was Alexandra's question. Thank you. That answers it nicely. We could carry on, and unfortunately there are some questions here that we haven't had a chance to get to today, so we will come back to you on those, I do promise. But it just remains for me to say thank you particularly to Anthony. It is always great to hear from practitioners with real experience of these CLM tools, and our membership really appreciate you sharing your time with us today, so thank you so much for that. But also to Hiro and to the Agiloft team for your partnership in this session today, and for pulling all the materials together. So thank you again for that. But also thank you, our audience. Without you, our audience, these webinars would be very dull and boring. So thank you for your attendance and for your great questions today. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed, and please do enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anthony. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.